Tech Revision with Mrs. Swanee Pooh.
Hi, Year 11. This video is going to take you through some of the key bits that you need to know for the exam coming up. So this is the exam focus. This was what AQA have given us as a bit of a heads up that these are going to come up in some of the higher mark questions. So hopefully this gives you enough information to pick up some marks in those areas. So we're going to go through this really quickly. This is probably going to be one of the last revision videos I do for this year, as I think I've given you quite a lot to work on. But I thought I might go through this just as a bit of a reminder. So first one being, there is a video about selection of materials and components. There's actually two videos on it, where we looked at why materials are chosen for their function, why they're chosen for aesthetics, why environmental factors might come in, can they be recycled or reused, how easily available they are. So for example, there has been a chip shortage, sadly not, well luckily not McDonald's chips, but microchip shortage, and also a sand shortage, so that's had a big impact on the production of lots of different products. We covered bulk buying. We thought about social, cultural and ethical factors, such as buying from, like sweatshops and places like that. And we also covered the FSC and fair trade, which are two really good things to talk about if ethical factors do come up, because these two organisations are really looking after people in lots of different countries. FSC looking after forests, but also looking after like the indigenous people that live in the rainforest and all sorts of different things in the environment. And fair trade looking after the farmers and the producers of lots of range of different materials, making sure they get fair pay, but also looking after the communities. So that's the first area that's going to be one of the focuses for the exam. Some of the other focuses, we've got ecological and social footprint. These I think are relatively straightforward. You know what deforestation is, and mining and drilling and farming. You can definitely give some examples of why these things would be damaging to the environment. The mileage of a product from its raw material source. So this here is product life cycle. Okay, and that is going to be all about things like how much it's traveling, how much CO2 it's giving off. It's basically all about its carbon footprint. So if you're happy with carbon footprint and all the different areas of that, you should be fine with this. And again, that's carbon footprint there. Now these ones is a classic one that comes up, the 6 R's. The top tip I would give with this is make sure you've got some examples that you can give. So for example, with refuse, I always give the example that I will refuse to buy a plastic water bottle and I will buy an aluminium one because it is better for the environment, more easily recycled. Another example would be I will not buy another smartphone because my current one is absolutely fine. You might also, for example, talk about repairing things, so making sure that products can be easily repaired, reducing the amount of polymers that you use. Recycling is pretty obvious. And also upcycling is quite a good one here to talk about, because that's quite a fashionable thing to do. Rather than throw a product away, give it a new lease of life as something new. It's quite a good thing to talk about. Okay, social issues in the design and manufacture of products, safe working conditions, reducing oceanic and atmospheric pollution, reducing the detrimental impact on others. So this is kind of a little bit about carbon footprint again, but also about things like fair pay. So you could bring in fair trade, you could bring in working conditions of people in sweatshops, and I gave the example of Apple asking people to work very long hours. So I think most of you would be able to give some examples of this. even if you've spoken about it in a different subject. Right, these are the ones that we have covered. We've covered definitely lots of these material processes, and if you're a textile student watching this, this is where we split slightly. So you will focus on textile processes, and my students, my product design students and Mr. Johnson's product design students will mostly focus on polymers as the main types of processes, but you might also bring in some timber processes if you've used them in your NEA. Okay, so production aids, I have literally just done a video about production aids, so the use of things like templates and jigs and patterns. Have a look at those. There is a video on the VLE and on YouTube that gives you some of that. I've seen that come up in a question before. And then you need to have an awareness of some of these processes. So for us, I'm going to cross out the ones that we don't need to worry about, because these are all processes to do with timbers and things. You can saw and drill polymers, fair enough. And textiles, yours would be cutting and shearing. That would be the one that you would go for. Brazing is a metal process. Welding, you can do polymer welding, but it's not one that comes up very often, and hopefully it doesn't come up. Lamination is more of a timber process. We know that one from lamination of plywood. Soldering, we don't need to know too much about. 3D printing is one we do need to know. Batik and sewing, sorry textiles people, I'm crossing them out, but those are the ones that you would need to have a good awareness of, as well as other types of printing processes. And bonding, I think, is more to do with papers and boards, but it could, I guess, come into textiles as well. But for the product design people, you do not need to know about those two there. Okay, so last one, you need to know vacuum forming. You don't need to know creasing or pressing, but that could be textiles, I would imagine. You do need to know casting, folding or bending. You do not need to know about, but those could again be textiles, potentially folding, not bending. We've covered all of these in lesson, and there is a video that covers these as well. So have a look on the VLE if you're not sure what to focus on. Minimum and maximum measurements. This is talking a little bit about tolerances. There is a video about tolerances. It's in the quality control video. So have a check of that. You should understand what tolerances means. And then some commercial processes. We do not need to know paper and boards. We do not need to know timber-based materials or metal. Polymers, that's the one that we need to know. We do not need to know electrical and mechanical. And textiles, those are the ones that you might need, well, that you will need to have a good awareness of and be able to talk about. Quality control. I've done a video about quality control, so have a look at that on the VLE or on the YouTube. I covered a depth stop, which is a good example to talk about. I also talked about a no-go fixture. Textile-based materials, you may check against against an original sample, or you can use patterns as well to ensure quality. You do not need to know that one there. So we've done quality control. It's on the VLE. Have a look at that if you're not sure about that. And just one or two slides left. This environmental one, again, you'll notice that it is, again, we've got fair trade mentioned, we've got deforestation and carbon dioxide. So again, all of those things that we've already mentioned. This is a big one. The use of freehand sketching, isometric and perspective drawing, and 2D and 3D drawings. You've done loads of that in your NEA. System and schematic drawings, we can ignore that one. That shouldn't be something that comes up because that's mostly used in other sort of specialisms. We have done loads of annotated drawings in your NEA, so that shouldn't be something that you need to look at too much. Exploded diagrams, useful to show the how a product is assembled. You might want to just give a quick Google to exploded drawings just to give you an idea of what they look like. Exploded drawings basically show how a product is assembled. It shows like the order of components, and it can be useful to show internal details. And then we've got these horrible things, third angle orthographic, which are those horrible drawings where you get a top view, a front view, and a side view, and you're quite often asked to complete one of these and then draw it, whatever it is, in isometric. Okay, so if one of these comes up, fingers crossed it doesn't, but if it does, just have a look back at your notes, and if requested, I will do a video on orthographic drawing. So send me an email if you want a video about orthographic drawing. Just to recap that again, this next one, interviews with clients or users, that is nothing difficult. You've done that in your NEA. Computer-based tools, that means using CAD. You've done tons of that in your NEA, Space Claim and CorelDRAW, so please don't forget that. And modelling basically means prototyping, okay? And again, huge amount of that done in your NEA, and think about why it was useful. To show your models to your client, get some feedback, identify problems with the product. So that is that section there. Prototype development, this is NEA all over, okay? So it could be how the development of prototypes satisfy the requirements of the brief. Well, you've all evaluated your designs against your specification. You've all responded to client wants and needs. You've managed to demonstrate some innovation with the design of your products. You've tried to develop things that are functional, considered aesthetics, and thought about how maybe your product could be marketed. So this I don't think is too bad. All of this, how to evaluate prototypes, this is all NEA all day long when you've got your design ideas and you've got some client feedback. This is all about that, and you should be able to quite confidently write about that, even maybe giving some examples from your NEA this year. Last one is material management. So this is about trying to reduce waste. So this is things like tolerances again, things like using reference points, templates, jigs, and other patterns. You can see that's kind of production aids again. And thinking about we've done this in your NEA. When you get things laser cut out, for example, you might ask for loads of little circles to be cut out. You would put them as close together as you possibly can to reduce the amount of wastage. This process is actually called nesting, and it's kind of like tessellation, but it's just to think about how you can reduce the amount of material that is wasted in production. So that is all of the areas that are the main focus for the exam this year. So if any of that does not ring a bell, you might want to go back through your notes, through the textbook, through some of the videos, and make sure that you are at least ready for that, because we know that those areas are going to come up in the exam. I hope that's useful. See you on the next video.